Thanks, Debbie, the officers. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning. This was a last-minute scheduling when I found out you were all gathered in one place, and I was preparing to send you some information that we may be able to take some time this morning to flush out some information and exchange some ideas as we prepare for this opportunity. The one thing that I found out when I left municipal government, went to county government, if I wanted to know anything, I went to our county auditor, Chris Beeson, in Wayne County, because Chris had the answer. And he also let me know that I was doing things wrong on a regular basis. While I do not profess to have all of the answers in your area, I did learn a little bit from Chris over the years, and for that I'm very grateful. The Indiana General Assembly changed the 911 statute in the last session. And for a number of years, as we've lobbied for additional funding for 911, and I'll touch on that briefly in a few moments, one of the questions that members of the General Assembly have had is, what does it take to run a PSAP or a 911 center? And I've been here involved in this for about 6 years, and our standard answer has been, we don't have the slightest idea. We know what we're collecting in 911 fees. We know what we're expending from that fund back in the day when it was wireless and wireline separate funds. We have some general idea of what's being spent from the general fund, but in most counties, the 911 center is embedded into one or more other funds that you're managing. In the commissioners, maybe in the sheriff's department. Within the sheriff's department, they're using multiple funds to pay. You may be receiving reimbursement from municipal government through an interlocal agreement. So we really don't understand what it costs to run 911 and dispatch in the state of Indiana. Well, as discussions progressed in the last session, they became very adamant, the lawmakers, that you're continuing to ask for additional revenue. Counties are continuing to tell us that they don't have enough money. The time has come that you answer the question, what's it costing the counties, what is it costing the state to run these 911 centers? So they put language in the bill that you'll recall last year you had to report to our office every expenditure from your Fund 1222 or your local statewide 911 fund. The change in the law is that this year you have to report to us every expenditure from every fund that you use to operate your PSAP for 911 and for dispatching. Well, you take a public safety guy with limited knowledge and my staff, and we start putting together what we believe is a useful form to be able to collect that data, to be able to generate some type of report for the lawmakers to understand where we're at dollar-wise. The form that is before you this morning, let me say, is in draft form because we know that we have missed some areas, and we also recognize that we are not going to be all-inclusive in some of these areas because each of the 92 counties do things differently. So as you look at this form, you'll notice that we've provided a couple of other columns. That is for your use as you work through this form to understand that if it doesn't really fall into a classification in the final draft, that you can use other. Now, we did that last year, and I had a couple of counties put every expenditure under other. And I sent it back with a request that they break that down in the categories we asked for. And they returned it as other. So I sent them a letter and said, okay, we're just going to hold your money until you break that down for our use. So they put it into personnel and equipment. That satisfied me. Those are the two largest expenses in a 911 center, and that worked for what we were trying to do. What we'll find as we look at this report is that it goes much deeper than that, and those counties will not be able to just use two categories as they file these responses this year. Our intention is for this form to be online. We'll email it to you. It'll be on our website. I'm going to hopefully meet the officers of this organization today and we'll work with them for them to have this form. It's going to be PDF fillable, where you file the form electronically, and not a manual fill out by hand and mail in. So please keep an open mind as we look at this, and if something jumps out, the officers in Debbie's office, they have my contact information. I want to work with this organization so this works for you. While the statute says that the PSAPs are responsible for filing this information, talk to a 911 director and see if they can sort out these line items. So I have met with that organization, and we've gone over a draft of this form. We're doing this with you today, and what we're asking the 911 directors, the sheriffs, the auditors, is to work together, because there are some items in this report that maybe you would not understand when it comes to 911 technology and what the difference may be between circuits and CPE and those types of issues that we're asking for. So it's going to be a group effort at the local level. However, my office is always more than willing to work with each of you to identify causes of concern or areas of confusion, trying to understand where an expense may need to be reported. The deadline for this report is January 31st. So our goal is to have this published by the second week of November. And I heard from many of you last year that you have a lot of work to do in the month of December. And adding 2 weeks or 3 weeks in the month of November may not be a great deal of help for you. But I anticipate that once we get this locked down, that next year we'll be able to get it out much earlier to allow you to start gathering the information that you may be looking for. So as you look at the form, the top section under administration, personnel costs, pretty straightforward. Understanding that in some counties, like in Wayne County where I came from, we had an employee where we paid part of the year from 911, and then part of the year came from the IT department. And we had to track all personnel costs for that position accordingly. You may have those examples. If you have an employee that you're only paying a percentage of their salary, such as that example, make sure you include only that percentage of the salary and that percentage of the fringe benefits if it's strictly for the 911. We're not trying to capture, in my example, the GIS coordinator's salary for his duties beyond what he did in 911 for the city and the county within GIS. And I do not have all of the answers in those scenarios, so what we're instructing everyone to do is use your best judgment. Right? Use your best judgment and try and determine what it's costing the county for that particular expense. The line items within this report came from examples that we found in other states that they were collecting through recommendations from directors or sheriffs that we've talked to in the state. And you may find others that apply that we would be applicable to everyone that we could add to this form, or as an individual county, you could add that under other because it applies just to your particular situation. Administrative cost, pretty self-explanatory. Where that may offer some confusion is that in office supplies, if you have a central purchasing agent that buys office supplies for every agency in the county and it's not tracked by department, use your best judgment. I'm not sure that Indiana will end up here as some other states are in distributing their money. But we want to make sure that we capture every eligible expense that it's costing you. Not that we will, in the foreseeable future, distribute 911 money based on cost, but it's important that we have that total picture to the best of our ability. Under administration, office expenses, advertising, promotion, training expenses. Training's pretty self-explanatory, and that is an eligible expense out of the 911 fund. but you also may have county-wide training that you're doing that you're paying for from the general fund. As you go across the sheet, the very first column is the statewide 911 fund. That's your Fund 1222. That's the money that we send to you. Next is general fund, and then we began to try and identify what we were aware of that counties were using to pay for the operation. COIT, LOIT, CAGIT, Racino. If you receive revenue from an interlocal agreement, while you may deposit that into your general fund, if there is a way to identify the expenditures from that particular line item, because the municipality is requiring you to report it, try and separate that into the interlocal agreement the best that you can. Racino, and then there are a couple of columns for other. There may be other funds. Debbie shared with me this morning that in some counties, the sheriff's department, you may be using commissary to pay for something in the 911 center or the dispatch. List that under other. And then if there are other funds that you have that you're using, you can provide those in there and specify the name of that fund. As you turn to the back of the first page, utilities. As we developed this form, the conversation came about, what if the 911 center is co-located in another county facility? It's in the county building. It's in the sheriff's department. How do we calculate the percentage of obligation for that expenditure to the 911 center? Well, the recommendation that I provided to some of the counties is to follow the formula that you utilize for your 4D reimbursement. That's a sensible formula. If you have another formula that is reasonable that you're using, use that formula. Just use something that's tested and reasonable to be able to identify that 911 center in the sheriff's department or in the county building is responsible for 30% of the utility or 30% of the insurance or gas bill. Anything reasonable, just so you capture that cost. Some counties, they have to pay for snow removal and lawn care because it's a standalone facility somewhere, and the city or county does not take care of that. Formula, same way for insurance in the next line item, and also under the generator. If you have an emergency backup generator that is utilized for the entire building and not just 911, try and figure a percentage for that. If the generator is specifically there for 911, but you just happen to have the rest of the county building attached to it, put 100% of the cost in there, because that's the purpose for the generator. You just happen to have one large enough to carry the rest of the building in that scenario. The top of the third page, we start getting into 911 terminology. Excuse me. And this is where your 911 director will be able to help you. Now, we'll divide you into two different classifications there. How many of you in here know that you have a contract with AT&T as your 911 system service provider? All right. What you receive is a lump sum contract that they'll provide you 911 service from A to Z for X number of dollars. They will not itemize that cost for you. So you're going to put your total contract monthly cost to AT&T in other specified AT&T, because we know they will not break down what your alley database is costing you, what your 911 circuits are costing you per circuit. It's just a total lump sum cost. If you have CenturyLink or Digital as your system service provider, your contract is written and it's itemized. And your 911 director can help you identify that, or your sheriff, if someone in the sheriff's department is handling that, as to what those specific units are costing the county. So if you're AT&T, you got it easy. You put in a lump sum. And then the rest of you would be able to itemize that accordingly. In the middle of that page, the E911 telephone system, it's a continuation of top. The top is the 911 equipment itself. The bottom is, or the middle is the telephone system that's utilized within the 911 center. Right? That is separate from the administrative, if you have a PBX or a standalone administrative telephone system, and you'll find that elsewhere on this form. There again, this section, hand to your 911 director and have them provide that information or that direction for you. Administrative phone system, the back of the second page gets into CAD, computer-aided dispatch, GIS mapping, their logging recorder, all of this equipment located inside the 911 center. Now when you look at GIS and you look at mapping and you look at CAD, the question is going to come about, do we only include the expenditures for the 911 center, or do we include the expenditures for CAD and mapping in the sheriff's cars and the city police department cars and the fire department? And if you have that answering position in the local hospital for EMS. I haven't made a decision on that. I'm leaning towards you include all those costs because that is part of emergency response. And that's what we're after. It really does not do the PSAP any good to have CAD and mapping in the 911 center, but they have nowhere to send that data. And that's where we're headed in the world of 911 is data. So we need to capture those costs. So if the county is paying for those out of one of these funds, capture that. Note in the note field that it's all inclusive. That way we understand that, but we really need to capture those dollars across the entire spectrum of public safety. The radios included the radios in the 911 center, the remote transmitters, the circuits that connect the two. There again, your 911 director will work with you for those areas that we're trying to determine. The next item, set aside funds. What I'm looking for here is future planning or strategic planning in capital expenditures, especially in Fund 1222 is what we're focused on. Lawmakers key in on the fact that a county has $3 million in their 911 fund. And we sent them $700,000 for the sake of numbers this year, and they only spent $30,000 of that $700,000. Well, they're saying they need more money. What are they doing with the balance of that? Well, in a lot of counties, they may be stockpiling or saving that because they know that their contract with their 911 service provider is coming to an end, or that they're facing P25 upgrade, or they're going to have to replace their radios. And none of those things are cheap. So a lot of counties are beginning to save money in that Fund 1222 for that purchase they know they're going to make 2 or 3 years from now. That's where we want you to identify that while we have this sum of money and we're spending very little of that, we're carrying ourselves through the other funds, we have a plan for that. And our plan is a capital purchase or a contractual obligation when we renew with excuse me, with our system service provider. So please identify that. The last tab on that page, debt service, some of the counties are carrying that. We do not need the information about the length or the terms, just identifying the cost. And then on the last page is miscellaneous. For anything that you did not find fit in the first 4 pages, you can put it in miscellaneous. And then there's a notes field for any notes that you want us to have related to the financial information that you listed above. Right? As I said in the beginning, this is in draft form. I'm confident we missed something. How many of you in here in the last 10 minutes have found something that I missed? Great. Great. We want to make sure we have something that's usable. I need your help. I'm responsible for getting this information, but I can't get it from the individual counties. So I want to make it user-friendly for you and a team effort as we collect this to provide a report to the General Assembly. With that, I will open it up for specific questions or comments for a couple of minutes. I think I have time for that.
Yes, you do. Whatever you need.
On the last page, the signature where you're affirming that that everything is true, is that signed by the 911 director or the auditor?
That would be signed by the auditor.
I have problem with confirming there. I just feel that that would be more of, I don't know.
Okay, go ahead, go ahead.
You were already over there. In Marion County, we have 7 excluded cities in our county.
Nothing is easy in Marion County. We just rolled out text that it took me a year to get that done. But anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's all I've heard this week is complaints about Marion County. Anyway, we have 7 excluded cities. All but Speedway and Beech Grove, I think they have 1 unit together of the PSAP. Do they have to fill out one of these? Because we don't always distribute all of their funds.
Excellent question, and I appreciate that. Yes, and there will be a clarification in the instructions that in those counties that you have more than 1 PSAP, you're not consolidated. In Marion County, for example, we will send this to the municipality that manages that PSAP for them to capture those costs. Now, if the county pays for the 911 equipment, for example, in Marion County, they pay for the 911 equipment in Speedway and at the airport and so on, you would capture that in your report because you're paying that cost. What they're going to report are all the other line items, their personnel, their radios, etc. Thank you.
I just had a question about for example, our county has an interlocal agreement with the city of Greenfield. And you're wanting specific amounts. When that interlocal money comes in, I receipt it into the fund. So it helps fund the budget, but I have no way of knowing specifically which line item or which expenditure that goes to.
I'm shooting from the hip here. Correct me if I'm wrong. Greenfield gives you $300,000
Yes.
a year. Okay. You spend $2 million a year
I receipt it in.
personnel cost.
Okay.
Is it reasonable to say that that $300,000 is applied towards personnel?
You're saying so that your interlocal agreement is not specific enough
Right.
in order to
It's one
help
lump sum.
you to identify that.
Exactly.
Okay, and so, we would like the real world to have those specifics, but you just don't have that.
No.
And so you're going to have to make an allocation determination then. If you get that $300,000 and it's not specifying, one, we'll want to work on that interlocal agreement for future. And then two, Barry, if that would be appropriate for you, is for them they're just going to have to allocate and make a determination what they are determining that they're using their funds versus their partners' funds for. Is that appropriate enough?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that would be appropriate. As I said, your 2 largest expenses in your 911 center is your personnel and your network equipment. And that's where the largest percentage of that revenue is expended. And this discussion came up in a small county last year about utilizing that interlocal revenue and accounting for that.
Yeah, because our county gives a portion and city gives a portion. So what you're saying is then you do want that broken out in the perfect world, the interlocal agreement should specify each allocation.
In the perfect world. But in your scenario, if they're paying you X number of dollars, you really don't know if you're using that dollar for
No,
personnel
I
or
don't.
network.
It's a guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
In Allen County, we have an interlocal agreement where we send all the 911 money directly to the city of Fort Wayne, who manages the PSAP. We also send a general fund portion of our money. So those would be two line items that we would, just say that go to the Fort Wayne PSAP. But then the whole department is housed in a county-owned building that we really don't reconcile. Would we include their portion of the allocated insurance cost or any data processing that the county pays for indirectly?
Yes. And then in your scenario, we dealt with this last year. I think we then had to work with the city controller
Yes.
to actually develop this report.
Most of the expenses are from the PSAP would be paid from the city of Fort Wayne because they manage the PSAP.
Yes. Yep. So you would file, while we want one report per county, I would ask that you work with the city controller to compile your data and submit one report. So you are capturing what the PSAP share in the county building is. That's included, then along with the expenditures out of the city budget. We want to make sure we capture all of those costs.
Are you looking for indirect costs of the county, like running payroll, processing claims, assigning addresses, that type of thing?
That is not called for in this report to the legislature, simply based on the fact that those soft costs would be occurring whether you had the 911 center or not.
Do you know offhand if Frontier breaks down the telephone billing that you was wanting?
I believe that with Frontier previously being Verizon, theirs are listed by line item. Most of the Frontier counties in Indiana now are utilizing InDigital as their 911 service provider. While your contract is still with Frontier, it's provided by InDigital as itemized. So you will have that. You should have that. Let me put it that way. Anything else? Well, I really appreciate your time this morning, your comments, your questions. I know you're not going to go home and look at that this weekend, but next week, if something comes to mind, be sure and point it out, and we'll do everything we can to accommodate the suggestions and implement those into this form so it's easier for each of the counties to be able to use. Thank you very much.